Welcome back to Walk with TFB. Tim Bryson here, and as y'all know, I'm a Black millennial who was eager to have an unfiltered conversation with authentic people centered on international education, global sport, and Black culture. Today's episode and topic is one that, similar to last week, we should have had this be one of the first episodes on this podcast, given this topic, but not just the topic, but how it truly encompasses everything about sport. Again, this is not my area of expertise whatsoever. So I had to bring the expert, and they may hate that word, but it's true, just given the awards, publications, and voice they have in this space, to talk more about sport ecology, sport environmental justice, et cetera, et cetera. They're from the A. They bounced around a number of different schools, unfortunately. A school down in Tuscaloosa, which we'll mess around with in a second. But without further ado, man, y'all help me welcome Forbes 30 under 30. Dr. Jessica Murfree. What's popping, homie?
Woo! Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you.
You too.
Like I said, you new to the city, man. What have you explored so far? Any favorite restaurants? Of course, breweries, moments.
Yeah, I moved here and then immediately hit the ground running. So I haven't spent a whole lot of time checking out the city, which is going to be a priority now that it's beautiful outside. But there's like a ramen spot up the street from me that I'm becoming a regular at, which is cool. I think everywhere I move, I make a goal to I'm going to become a regular at one place.
Yeah.
And the ramen spot is hitting it for me. I've gone to a couple soccer games and make a point to have some walking meetings on campus just so I can check campus and Clifton area out, which is really cool. And that's getting me out of the office. And, campus just kind of comes alive. So it's cool to disappear into crowds and just observe the Bearcats and how they move.
Yeah. I mean, you came in at a very pivotal moment, this Big 12 Bearcats. Are the signs still on campus? I ain't been there in like 2 weeks. They still everywhere?
Yeah. So there are signs on, and see, this is how new I am. I don't know the name of the street.
Me neither.
There's
So
signs that go in between where soccer and baseball
yeah.
are, right?
Yep.
And then after college game day, the center of campus had some big banners up. Those are probably down now.
Wow. Like I said, I'm glad to get you on. I'm glad you're in the city. Obviously glad you're working at the institution, which we'll get into a little bit later. But this episode is all about you, right? And as I shared before, 3 segments, our listeners know this as well. And so we cannot get into the meat of our conversation without first learning more about you. Now, so segment 1, Dr. Jess, what's your story?
Ooh, I have a fun story, I think, because it's different and it resonates with a lot of people, even though my experiences have been pretty singular. Like you said, I'm from Atlanta, got it on the wall behind me. And that was a really cool place to be a little kid. Haven't really lived there since leaving for college, so I can't speak a whole lot about it now. But at the time, it was an awesome place to sort of grow up and learn about the world because that was a place where you had everybody. Nothing was weird because there was something for everyone. So I got exposed to the world and possibilities at a really young age, thanks to my family and my environment, my ecosystem. So yeah, growing up in Atlanta, I'm an only child. So my parents put me in everything. Blessing and a curse because I, got confident in a few things, some sports and activities, but then I got knocked down a few pegs in some sports and activities. Quit my fair share of things like cheerleading and pageants, piano lessons. But I was a Girl Scout and I played soccer and I swam, played catch outside with my dad. You could tell that I had to be the daughter and the son.
Oh,
playing catch with my dad, learning how to build a fire and pitch in a tent. But then also my mom put me in ballet and jazz. So I did a little bit of everything and it was cool growing up in Atlanta where you had the opportunities to just try anything. I was in commercials. You just literally do whatever and figure out what you like and what works for you. I have so much of that upbringing so much of my upbringing to thank. for where I am now and some of the things I've gotten to see and achieve as a young person. I had one career goal in life, and I wanted to be a marine veterinarian, and I wanted to be on National Geographic and Animal Planet
Yep.
and Shark Week, and I wanted to have a lab on a boat, and that's what I wanted to do. To doctor up the sea turtles and the whales and the coral reefs, and that's the only thing I ever wanted to do. Um, so growing up, I worked at summer camp and I worked at the animal hospital in the summers. Following in my dad and my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was a poultry pathologist before going into education. And my grandfather was a large animal veterinarian for the USDA back when Black people could hardly go to veterinary school. So animals and the environment has been part of my life since before I was born, which made for some interesting experiences in nature and associated situations, camping, hiking. Like I said, I was a Girl Scout, and oftentimes not seeing other kids who looked like me was really normal. Just occupying those spaces that were previously legitimized as not being spaces where someone who looks like me would be welcome.
Mhm.
But I pressed on, studied on a boat before my senior year of high school. My parents did everything, setting me up for success to be the marine veterinarian that I said I wanted to be at age 4. Um, Played soccer, the longest of all the things that I said I tried. And right around time to start thinking about colleges and scouts were coming out to our school and to our clubs, I tore my ACL right before I turned 18, the day after my 18th birthday. Happy
Wow.
birthday, you're in
Wow.
the hospital.
Yeah.
And that took away a lot of what I had come to know as normal. Um, while I was good at school, I also had been playing soccer since I was 3.
Mhm.
And that was my afternoons, my evenings, my weekends, my parents' time, the clothes that I wore, the backpack that I carried. It was
Yeah.
all catered around this sport identity that I had that went away at an age where you really don't know what's going on. I'd already made my college decision at that point to attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which was a pipe dream of mine since being a kid, watching Mia Hamm, Michael Jordan, just legends come through in the Carolina blue, but thinking it was out of reach for me. But why not? Just apply,
Mhm.
see. The out of state acceptance was marginal. So I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
whatever. If we're paying to send test scores, we might as well run up the bill. And I got a Carolina blue letter in the mail. And um, my parents were like, you gotta go for it. And it was something that I don't know why I didn't think I would be afforded the opportunity to, maybe institutional pressures and bullying and those types of things.
Mhm.
Um, but I knew this was going to be a big, scary change. But if I wanted the things that I said I'd wanted and I'd worked for in my lifetime, that who was I to get in my own way of that? And to have the support of my community and my family meant everything. So in a knee brace, packed up and moved to the Tar Heel state. Not playing any sports now, could hardly walk. So I was an environmental science major, marine science minor, volunteered at the sea turtle lab, still worked at the animal hospitals in the summer, and was navigating this course towards becoming a marine veterinarian at the school that I had these dreams of achieving that at.
Wow.
And I hated it. Um, it was awful. I was 7 hours from home. My other family dog had just passed. I had an aunt pass. I was figuring out who I was and
Mhm.
trying to make friends and identifying friend groups. I was doing poorly in school, which was unusual for me. not being able to figure out why I'm taking these massive lecture classes, econ, chem, bio, and just bombing. And that took a toll on me that was so unfamiliar because I expected to do better. And then in figuring out what was going wrong, I didn't like my advisor. I didn't like these other mechanisms that were sort of controlling my experience. And so in all of that, I realized I was getting really bummed out in what I said I was going to do. I fell out of love with this career that I had crafted my entire life towards. It was depressing. It was not emotionally fulfilling. It became harder to show up to work at the animal hospital, at the sea turtle lab, wanting to save the world and all that. I just couldn't do it. I was becoming a hardened version of myself that I didn't recognize, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I had to make the tough phone call to my family to say, and to my like Black, educated, career-oriented parents, and say, you know what? I'm changing my major. I'm doing something totally different than what I had spent the last 18 and a half, 19 years telling you I wanted to do. And I flipped the script, which was a shock. And I said, I'm going to study sports, which was like not a thing, right? Like, you're going to what? You need to be packing your bags and coming home. We're paying tuition for what? For
Yep.
what?
Yep.
Why? This was not in the plan. This isn't what you said you were doing. You know, both of my parents and generations of Murfrees and Lees were educators. So this was just like bonkers. And they said, you're making an emotional decision. I said, I know. And I'll never forget that day. And I said, you just watch. I'll show you. And I changed my major to sport administration at UNC. I started volunteering and working for the athletic department, various sports teams, making a way for myself, became involved in all of the student-run organizations, working my way up to the top, gaining experiences, interning, shadowing, all of the things to have a resume that would make me undeniable. I ended up staying at Carolina for another year after I graduated, just building that portfolio and working in the athletic department before going to grad school at the University of Alabama. And was a grad assistant in event management there for the athletic department, which was awesome. 2 years that I was there just gave me unmatched experience in intercollegiate athletics, facilities and events and ops. Though that's my jam, hands-on, like very manual work to make the machine run was the best. But I asked a lot of questions while I was doing that. And I found myself working through situations and groups of people and the elements and all of these other things that controlled the way we could hold successful events at the school, conference, and NCAA levels. And I had a little like handy dandy notebook that I always kept on myself to write notes down as I worked. And what I found is that all of those notes, not all, most of those notes were questions. And my faculty advisor at Bama while I was there noticed that, let me tag along to academic conference to CSRI at the University of South Carolina. So now my worlds were kind of coming back together because of the South Halls who were at North Carolina and then at South Carolina, and then for me to come back there as a master's student, just like I don't know what's happening, but I'm here. He said, I want you to check this out. And I went and just soaked it all up and realized that there's a community of people who also ask questions. And he was like, have you thought about a PhD? And I said, no, but I'm thinking right now because you just asked me and I have no other choice but to weigh the facts and do the scientific method on this question that you just asked me. And that's what led me to the University of Louisville, where I got my PhD in 21. And that really sort of pushed me into this academic world. But I realized through all of these experiences that shaped me between sport and my original passion for the environment, for environmental science and nature and biodiversity that I had been pursuing since changing my major as an undergrad. I wanted a career that would be something that I could show up to as my full self every single day. And when I learned as a doc student that there was a way to combine the natural environment and sport into one, I've changed my story or my body of work to be a relentless pursuit of these two identities that I have every
Mm,
single day ever since.
love. Wow. Wow. I have so many questions and observations.
Okay.
The first of which, had I gotten accepted, Carolina's my dream school. And had I gotten accepted to that school, we would have been classmates.
That's crazy.
Well, obviously, it didn't work out. Went to South Carolina. But the second thing, what year did you go to CSRI?
My first
17?
year as a master's student would have been 17 or 18.
Yeah, we were there at the same time.
That's crazy
That's,
too.
that's actually that's actually wild, bro.
I mean, our world is very small. The
I
more
was
you
like,
realize how big it is, the smaller it gets.
I mean, also true. And but as I'm thinking about you talking about the environmental piece, my brother wanted to do marine bio actually. That's actually why I went to Coastal Carolina because I got a letter in the mail for him. Um, but it's neither here nor there. This conversation talking about the environment and segment two, getting into this your topic. Again, sustainability has been a, I guess, increasing topic of conversation. You mentioned on several different platforms that you identify as a sport ecologist. Like, what does that mean? Like for both myself and those who are listening, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so my colleagues coined the term sport ecology as the study of the relationships between sport and the natural environment. And those relationships are complex. There's many of them. There's specialists within that bucket of sport ecology in the same way there's specialists within finance and economics in
Mm-hmm.
sport.
Mm-hmm.
People, specialize in certain things. So within our sort of larger field of sport ecology, there are researchers who focus on environmental sustainability, on geography and history, on climate change, like myself, on waste management and circular economies. So there's a space kind of for all of us within the field to explore the multiple interconnections between sport and our planet. And really, at the end of the day, I think anyone who studies sport should and can be a sport ecologist, because anyone who studies sport by nature is also studying the environment. And
Mm-hmm.
without the natural environments, we don't have sport.
Okay, so when you, my brain is going. So when you first came up with this, or was introduced to sport ecology, right? If you think back to some of your first papers, what were you writing about? Like, what were you
Yeah.
thinking about? What questions were you answering?
So I was trying to figure out what could be a research home for myself. My first year as a PhD student was 2018, and the sport ecology group came to be in 2019. So I was able to really get in on the ground floor as a wet behind the ear doctoral
Wow.
student, which, as anybody who studies anything would know, when you are introduced to something that strikes your interest, you're like, oh, I could do this, I could do that, I like this, I want to do this, that, and the other. And you end up all over the place. And I really needed to spend time, and thank goodness for a faculty who kind of kept me on the straight and narrow,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what it is that I want to do, and what answers do I want, what questions do I need answered. And so I had to rely on networking outside of my program, and relying on the faculty expertise within my program to become a scholar. And these papers and research ideas and questions really started with, how does climate change affect sport, which is just this massive thing. It's bigger than a dissertation. As I've refined my area of interest over time, I realized that I'm more interested in how people come to know the realities of climate change through sport. because we're living in a world that is constantly changing, and we're sort of stepping into a permanently altered society because of climate change. But not everyone's a climate scientist. Not everyone is a scientist. Not everyone can read science. Not everyone cares to know science. People care to know and will read and are interested in sport. So if I can use sport as this mechanism through which I can communicate science, now I'm on to something. And so I've seen sort of a shift in my scholarship as a result of how I think about the nuances between what those two questions.
How people come to know about climate change through sport.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So as you're at what, do you think junior MBA earlier this year, but you didn't take me, which 2024 is on the way.
We can go back.
Please let me know where I need to be.
Okay.
You're at the Sport Positive Summit recently in London, right? So when you're going to these different outlets, are people asking you to come speak or present or share or train? Like, what are they asking you to train or to speak about? Like, what are those conversations you're having on a more localized level with these different organizations?
Yeah, I think I've seen a shift there too, because those requests originally started as, hey, we realize that this is something we need to know all about it. Can you tell us all about it?
Yeah.
To we're kind of all on board on this now. Now we need you to tell us what to do about it. Which is really cool because you can see how learning transforms organizations. I don't have to show up to junior NBA, to Pac-12, to Sport Positive and convince people of our changing planet. We're all convinced. We're all on board. But here's what we can do. Here's what junior NBA can do about it. Here's how Pac-12 can think differently about their sustainability initiatives. Here's how NFL Green can reach this community. Here's how to ask questions about air quality or biodiversity and not just labeling it as environmental sustainability. Here's how surfers can access indigenous knowledge to reshape the way they engage in the environment, in the ocean. And that moves the needle forward, or moves the ball forward.
Okay. So, I apologize. I took us a little bit further than where I think we probably should start. Okay. So how are you seeing climate change affect sport? Let me start more broad before I ask some deeper questions.
Great. When you hear about climate and the environment, media, news, whomever likes to use future terms like we will, it will, there will be someday, 20 years from now, goals. By 2050, we should. And that time is now. And that time was yesterday. It was last year. It was 20 years ago. Not in the future, because everybody on Earth, which is all of us, live in a world that has altered what it means to play and watch sport holistically on every level. Major sporting events are changing. They're changing in when they happen. Look at the last FIFA Men's World Cup. Totally different time of year by one half of a calendar year. Not coincidentally. The US Open is changing. FIFA and like larger federations are changing how mandated water breaks are required, how heat policies are enforced, time of day of play. We're seeing cancellations and rescheduling and backup plans for sporting events because we know that a hurricane is likely to hit around this time of year. So we're going to have some contingency plans in place. We're going to beef up our insurance policies. We're going to change our game contracts because what we experience on Earth is changing sport. It's too hot to play outside. There's not enough snow and ice to engage in winter sports. What even is winter? Because it's not lasting nearly as long. and we're getting spring and summer temperatures into fall and winter. Ironman swim portions get canceled because algae blooms in the river and now we can't swim. But algae is not supposed to bloom in the winter or in the river in the fall and winter, but we're getting April and May temperatures in October. And so it's just it's compounded to a degree now. People are losing their lives participating in sport because climate change is making it unsafe to play.
And so some of the questions that you've been asked to either present about, train on, teach people, I'm particularly thinking about Pac-12.
Yeah.
Definitely particularly interested in the Sport Positive Summit, given that there are many of you all who study sport ecology there. What are some examples of things that they're asking you to talk about, train, consult?
Yeah, some of the biggest topics are on understanding climate risks to sport. So yeah, these things are hazardous. They could be dangerous. They're a little bit scary, but what does this mean for our organization or for sport as a whole? A big one that I've been focusing on, or that's being requested of me more, is discussing climate and environmental justice, which is great because the sport organizations, they're already interested and they're more often than not already focusing on issues of social justice, which is basically like if the door was cracked. Social justice issues, cracked door, add the environment to it, now bust the door down. Because sport really picked up matters of social justice in diversity, equity, inclusion, in health, and physical and mental health, all of these things that are important to people and societies. The sport industry sort of rallied around those things and gave leagues and athletes platforms to discuss those, but we are not doing those efforts justice in the absence of considering the environment and how the environment plays a role in each and every one of those social justice matters that we say we care about. So that one has really been sort of my main charge for the sport industry over the last year.
And so like an example, like how the environment or climate intersects with social justice. Again,
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand too, so I can also communicate this to other people. Like, help me make the connection in my brain to like, oh, that does make sense.
Here's a good one. Tim, do you know how to ride a bike? Okay, so riding a bike is a fairly easy, if as an able-bodied person, is a fairly easy thing to learn that's often taught at a young age, right? Like you start on a tricycle, then a bike with training wheels, then the training wheels come off and like you got it over the span of, I don't know, a few weeks for a kid. And learning how to do that is something that you can pick up later in life, right? You don't necessarily forget how to ride a bike, but if you don't do it for a while and you start riding again, you might want to wear a helmet just in case. But I experienced in my lifetime the ability to ride a bike without a helmet. In the United States, Black Americans suffer cycling fatalities at rates that triple those that of white Americans and other racial or ethnic groups. Similarly, Black Americans suffer accidental drowning fatalities at rates that triple those of other racial or ethnic groups. And you start to question why. And at the surface, it seems like a racial thing. And it is. It's a societal thing that's rooted in prejudice and bias and, legal racism. But it's also an environmental thing. So in cities and in communities where that are lower income, marginalized, where Black and brown communities sort of historically find themselves because of the institutions that be, these are not places that have paved, accessible, well-lit bike paths. That has to do with infrastructure, that has to do with tax dollars, that also has to do with the environment and who is afforded the opportunity to engage in what. Now think of a Black American cyclist. Pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
Right. Swimming, same thing. It's there's always questions. I get them all the time. Oh, you're black? You scuba dive? You
Um,
swim? What do you do with your hair? You know how to swim? Like, can you get in the water? It's a thing. Like, black people don't swim is a very normalized sentiment.
mhm.
There's a reason why. And it has very little to do with Black Americans' interest in swimming and a lot to do with how water and spaces for water have been excluded from the Black community legally over time through, the government sort of controlling who has access to beach property, all the way to Jim Crow era laws segregating who can access public pools, and then into the weaponization of water against Black people since the transatlantic slave trade through the Jim Crow era. We don't have good relationship with water, and that's been passed down through us through intergenerational mechanisms and trauma that still persists to this day. So it's not, oh, Black people just need swim lessons. It's deeper than that. It is
Good.
extremely cultural, and it is environmental, and it is a social justice issue that has deep roots in environmental racism.
This is good. I can't wait to drop this one. This is good. So let me take us more global because as you're talking, I think my assumption and probably naivety was when you say environment, I immediately think weather or climate or hurricane, but it's literally the environment.
There's
And
all of
so
it.
yeah, this is good. So as you travel to the UK, obviously we're seeing sport globalization, internationalization, et cetera, et cetera. How are you seeing? What are you thinking? Like when Big 12 say, "Yo, we're Big 12 Mexico is gonna be a thing. We're gonna have operations in Mexico." That yada yada. NFL. Like, what are you thinking as people beginning to be more open to mobility of fans and athletes and organizations?
It was really cool. So last year we got to sort of be in the area before the London NFL games and sort of
Mm-hmm.
check the venue out, but I wasn't in there on game day. I saw it when the stadium was empty and they were like decorating. But to see it live, I thought this is pretty cool because everybody in the city of London somehow became a Jags fan. And I was like, have you ever been to Jacksonville? I'm just booing every person in teal that I see. But they made it feel like this was a Jacksonville home game. I got off the tube and was like, wait a second.
Dang.
I thought this was going to be for all of us. And it's clearly just for Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. So here I am in my black and red, like, ugh.
Wow.
And it showed me that this isn't just hype for two American teams today, two different ones next weekend. There's an interest in this, and there are a lot of people here. My very first thought, and I don't want to, I don't mean this in the wrong way, but I kind of do. My very first thought in thinking of like why the Jags get these home stands in the UK is because Jacksonville's not about to not be a place anymore. That was my first thought. I said the Jags need somewhere to play because Jacksonville's about to be underwater, and like, of course, that's where
No,
my environmental head went. Like, if they need a place to play, they could play in London because Florida is just it's gonna be the first to go. And so if this, and I don't know the decision making behind it, but if the environment has anything to do with how we have reshaped what it means to be in sport and how we can access sport, it's not uncommon to see relocations happen for the sake of the environment.
environment.
And if the NFL is testing waters to see how global their fans can be, potentially relocating the league could also be an environmental adaptation strategy.
So I'm gonna quote you if you don't mind in this newsletter I got coming out tomorrow. This come out next week, but because I literally am writing a blog, if you will, on why a small market franchise team from Duval County is leading the NFL's globalization efforts. And there's the third bullet is this adaptation piece. Because I looked at it, I was like, yo, Jags they've been playing in London since 2007. First 5 years were cool, whatever. Over the last 10 years, Jacksonville is the only team that's played every year in London. There's been 28 different teams. That's
It's weird.
not coincidence.
Yep.
That
Wonder.
is, you got me, you got me thinking, you really got me.
Well, I did my job. Thank you. And
I'm not, that's the educator in you. Send us the pops and moms and be like, I'm still here. Wow. And so what'd you present on at the summit in London?
yeah, so this year I was invited to come back to build on the workshop that myself and two Paralympians led last year on, what does this whole like environmental climate justice thing mean in sport. So last year we gave our presentation just to get our audience to think in an environmentally inclusive mindset, because the buzzwords were coming out, people were setting up working groups and committees and offices for DEI and inclusion and all this stuff that ends up getting siloed away from maybe the organization's overall mission. And we said, hold on a second. Look at your organization, look around this room. When thinking about who gets a seat at the table, or who do we represent, or what are our missions and our visions for equity and inclusion in our organization, are we asking questions about the environment when we ask those things, or nah? And then when we think about environmental sustainability, which often gets siloed away from those more social initiatives, we have to ask why that is, and what are the policies or the ideas or the initiatives that are coming forward and coming to fruition in environmental sustainability for our organization. Is it recycling? Is it locally sourcing food and goods? Is it composting? Is it limiting plastic? Is it like growing on site? And then who's benefiting from that? What is our community? Are we focusing on replanting and biodiversity, yet our stadium is built in low income public housing neighborhood? Because if we're not making those connections, these efforts are pointless. If our community doesn't have access to the things that we are prioritizing as an organization, as a team, as a league, as a conference, as an event, why do it? And we have to think about the structures that are in place, in that some people and community groups are already disadvantaged by the environment, and sport can address those disparities. Sport can also continue to perpetuate those disparities, and we've seen countless examples of that. So this year we come back to build that up a bit more. We recognize that there are environmental injustices that are faced by members of our community or in society. Now we have to start thinking differently, which was the theme of our conversation this year, to challenge legitimized norms. So just like when I said, can you think of a Black American cyclist? And we're all like, oh. History has told a story that we hold on to as true, but we don't ask why that is history's story.
That's good.
If you think about a 100-meter sprinter, gold medalist, you think of a certain person. If you think about a snowboarding champion, you think of a certain person. If you think about PGA Tour winning golfer, you think about a certain person. That has a lot to do with their demographics, their upbringing, their affluency, the sports that they're willing to access. When you think about a scuba diver, people don't think of me. And that's just because the story is told in a different way. So we need to think differently about who has access and opportunity to certain sports. One, if we want the sport world to be inclusive and be this big, powerful thing we say it can be. But two, we also need to think about how the environment plays a role in who has access and opportunity to engage in certain sports, and why we keep upholding that. Why don't we just challenge it and say, yeah, I can be a scuba diver. Yeah, you can be a cross-country skier. Yeah, we can all go out and climb a mountain together right now. And that'd be totally normal. Because that's the kind of world I want to live in. And so that was the main point that we tried to drive home this year. And one, people recognize the environment is changing. It's harming certain people more than others. But sport legitimizes that. And we all should be a part of the movement to undo some of those implicit biases that we hold on to and craft a different story for sport.
It's good. I mean, one, I can't wait to the students I'm teaching to take a class with you or just to learn with you, because I'm even thinking about FCC. I mean, there was a huge uproar when they put that stadium there. Whatever, considering putting that stadium there, and evidently there's plans to put a community development around it. That's why they just knock down shit to the right of the stadium when you're looking at it. But
Yeah.
I think, see, again, I would have never thought about it like from this lens and language you're using now, as far as like, it is exacerbating the BS these communities are already dealing with.
Yeah.
Never thought
The
about
first
it
time
though.
I went there, just like we didn't park nearby, so we just
Mhm.
sort of walked through, and then we were at the stadium, and I was like,
How? Yep.
I know what's going on
Yeah.
here.
Yep. Yeah, but I asked some of the people that work for FCC, and they said, again, there was a lot of uproar, opposition, etc. But I guess over time, I guess they've been working directly with the community leaders to say, like, what do y'all need? What do y'all want? Based on what I've heard, what I've been told. So then hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, they mentioned building an entire community with like a grocery store and access to different things on that corner, because right now, as you know, or anyone in Cincinnati knows, there's nothing anywhere close to there.
So I wonder, like, the people who were displaced and will be displaced for the next 2 or 3 years before this grocery store is built, like, where are they and what are they
What
eating? And where are they going to
exactly?
school and where are they working and how are they getting around?
Yep.
How are they paying bills? Like, all of
That's
those things.
good. This is good. The last thing, and I'll ask this question, but I'm gonna have you keep it brief because we'll bring you back on probably 23 next year, because we got men's World Cup, hopefully women's World Cup, LA 28. You about to be busy.
I know. About to be.
You about to be busy, yo. So just initial thoughts as you think about the world's largest mega events coming to North America over the next 5 years? There's just three of
Yeah.
the main ones.
I'm kind of excited about the I'm calling it the tri-state, but the tri-nation World Cup, I think, because it will be a good litmus test for a few things. One, does this improve people's access to soccer?
Hmm.
Because there will be more opportunities for more local markets to see a game. Might not be
Mhm.
your country, might not be your team, but you might have a better opportunity to be a part of the environment without traveling as far. So I'd be curious to see if that actually happens. It will also show us what it means to host more regionalized mega sporting events.
Good.
Um, but we live in a consumer culture, and I
Mhm.
think that those two things could, as the third topic, could backfire wholly, and we see massive carbon emissions, massive sort of community disruption, because instead of scaling back many events, we do everything just as big.
Yep.
And so that could, we'll see. But now with the 2030 announcement,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was like, oh gosh, have we not learned? I don't even know what our world will look like in 2030. In 6.5 years, summer is already too hot right now. And in 6.5 years, it's going to be hotter. It's going to be wetter. We're going to have more mosquitoes. We'll probably have another big communicable disease event.
Mm.
So I just hold my breath. I look at my email and I just go like
Yeah.
that.
No, you're right. I mean, I'm gonna leave it right there for now, but I would love to have a further conversation
We'll
with you
follow
about
up.
really around sport globalization, higher rate internationalization, and sport ecology, because there's so many, again, thoughts that I have going, things that run in parallel, intersecting, challenging. So we'll definitely link up for sure.
Perfect.
But segment 3, I know you have a lot to do as a consultant, researcher, fun human being you are. I might go scuba diving, not know how river though.
Let's
No,
go.
no,
Yeah.
not we ain't going that river. Yeah, there's no, I wouldn't put. There's no part of my body I would put in that water. But
When I
segment
lived in
3.
Louisville, there were signs that were like, don't let your dog drink from the water. And I'm like, if the dog
Oh
can't
yeah,
drink from it.
no way. There's no way. But how can I and how can our podcast community best support you your work and your evolving purpose journey?
Yeah, I love that question because I think it's so easy to just keep our head down, stay in our lane.
Hmm.
Um, but hopefully through this conversation, all the listeners sort of realize that this is everybody's lane. We all share this one planet. There's no backup planet. I know there are a lot of billionaires who are trying to make that happen, but it hasn't yet. So
Hmm.
I hope that everybody has this sort of global citizenship to appreciate the environment in ways that we might take for granted. Close the laptop, open a window, go outside, think about the steps that you take on the ground, touch some grass, and then think about why we care about sport. And I guarantee all of our stories point back to some moment that happened when we were kids.
Hmm.
And then if like I ask my students this all the time, like, why do you want to work in sport? What do you want to do? And they're like, I want to create memories for the next generation because I had good memories in sport as a kid. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about this from an environmental lens because the planet that you played on as a kid is entirely different from the planet that today's kids are playing in and
Hmm.
the future kids are playing in. And so what I would hope that this community can do, like, yeah, please read my stuff, my colleagues' stuff, and get involved. But I really hope that this conversation makes all of the listeners think in an appreciative way about this world that we all share. Because this is all we got. And nothing else matters. The sport, the ticket sales, the revenue, the analytics, the marketing, the social media, the different ways that we engage, the facilities that we build, none of that matters if we don't have a livable planet.
Mic drop. No, that's for me to say. Well, then thank you, yo. That's a phenomenal conversation. Like you could, I mean, clearly people are asking you to fly around the world and the country to, share on this topic. But you could talk for hours, I'm sure, just about what's going on, what our individual responsibilities are, institutional responsibilities. I mean, like we go on and on and on. But for what we did discuss and what you did share today, I want to say thank you because we got award-winning research doing scuba diving millennial on this podcast. So we appreciate you.
Thank you. This has been so cool.
All good, my friend. Well, hopefully, we don't come from our breweries quite yet. We'll talk about the environment in breweries another time. I
That's
hope it's
fine.
not.
I've only been to one. It's down the street from me.
Oh, I can take you to Sonder. Take you to Sonder with
Cool.
Wayne. But for everyone else, man, thank y'all again for tuning in to another episode of Walk with TLB. I hope you enjoy it. Well, I know you enjoy this conversation. I'll be sure to put Dr. Jessica's information in the podcast description so you can connect with her individually. But we all have a responsibility. I think this conversation definitely excited me to think more critically about what is my role in helping to include this information as I'm sharing about internationalization. So I definitely appreciate that as well on a personal note. But next week we're back at it, man. Only a few more episodes left of this season before we close it out. But as always, I'll see you next week. And until then, walk with me. Peace out.